I'm the Director of Community Investments at SRE Network. Really excited to run through our fall 2022 open grants process with you. If you have questions while we're going through the slide, please feel free just to come off mute and stop me. Samantha, our community manager, is also here if you want to private chat them to her and she can repeat them back to me, or you can put them in the chat. I'm going to try my best to keep up with the slides and the chat at the same time, but that's not my greatest skill, so feel free to just interrupt. And we will jump in. I'll also ask at the end, so you can hold them if you'd like to. I think everyone here, especially looking at who's here, is familiar with SRE Network, but just in case, we are a Jewish network of 150 plus organizations rooted in a shared commitment to safety, respect, and equity for all. We inspire meaningful change in workplaces and communal spaces by bringing people together to address gender-based harassment, discrimination, and inequity. And we are here to talk about our community investments. To date, SRE has invested nearly $4 million in grants and supports to advance safety, respect, and equity with a focus on gender justice. To go over that sort of as in a history, thus far in 2022, we have granted $125,000 in strategic responsive grants. We just announced those grantees earlier this week. We also did another open grants pool earlier in the spring where we made $300,000 in grants, and then we're looking at granting $350,000 more in this final round of 2022 in the fall. Last year in 2021, we invested $940,000 organizations advancing SRE with a focus on gender justice. In 2022, most of our grant making was in response to the COVID pandemic and making sure that we minimize as much as possible the impact on the field of gender justice in the Jewish community. And in that year, we awarded $500,000 to many of our prior grantees to help stabilize the field. In 2019, that was our biggest grant making push since our founding. We granted $1.86 million to do internal organizational effort strengthening capacity for organizations to address SRE and looking at SRE at scale in the Jewish community broadly. And in 2018, we did 5 rapid response grants that totaled $500,000, which we saw as upfront investments in field building needs, coordinating and scaling training programs, et cetera, et cetera. So before we jump into the fall 2022 process, I wanted to introduce you to a couple of our grantees through this video that I really love.
Women's Rabbinic Network has been around for over 40 years, supporting Reform women rabbis. But through our lived experiences, we advocate for all people within the Jewish community, working for safety, respect, and equity.
Mezuzah's mission is to put a kosher, fair trade mezuzah on the front door of every Jewish home in the world. We work with individuals as well as partner organizations to enhance their educational, outreach, and engagement programming using the mezuzah as a physical catalyst for Jewish identity development.
JWI works to build a world in which all women and girls can thrive by ending gender-based violence, providing access to long-term economic security, and lifting and mentoring women leaders.
With SRE's powerful support, we've been able to amplify our voice. We've been able to say proudly and surely that we stand by victim survivors, and we've been able to engage our partners with the very difficult but needed work of accountability and repair, finding a path forward.
With SRE's support, we have been able to offer mezuzahs to victims and survivors of domestic abuse and violence through a nationwide network of Jewish social service agencies. When someone has to leave an abusive situation and set up their own home, expensive items like mezuzahs aren't usually high on the priority list. Putting a mezuzah on the door provides individuals and their families with a tremendous sense of security, continuity, and identity. No matter how difficult a person's struggle may be, they can still hold on to their tradition and maintain a sense of connection to the Jewish people. We are proud to partner with SRE on this novel and very important program.
With SRE support, JWI was able to launch an innovative program, Men as Allies, where we're working directly with men who serve as staff and lay leaders in our Jewish communal organizations, creating a space for them to hold conversations where they uncover unconscious biases and find ways to step up as allies in the workplace. Now that JWI is growing more robust work, SRE is right by our side as we bring Here For You into our communities, training staff from our Jewish organizations in how to better understand and support survivors of domestic violence and their children.
And two sort of shameless plugs from that video. Rabbi Mary Zamor is on the call with us, who you just saw. Hi, Rabbi Zamor. And then two, JWI, Jewish Women International, who was also in the video, is one of our recommended trainers for this round. So feel free to reach out to them as well. Jumping into, not watching the video again, but the next slide to talk about our fall 2022 open grants process. Our fall 2022 process is really our way of saying we've heard you. We heard you in our listening tours. We heard you in the feedback you gave after prior grant pools. We heard you in our member learning programs telling us that you have a need for funding to support the internal change work that you're trying to do within your organizations. And so this round is really dedicated to hiring expert consultants and trainers to support that work. So your grant must focus on training and consulting needs that directly address safety, respect, or equity in your work or communal space. To start with talking about the actual funding, we're looking at making 5 to 7 grant awards with an average grant amount of $50,000 over 1 or 2 years. We will consider smaller or larger requests. We understand that some of this work will cost more money, some of this work will cost less, but we are looking to fund as many organizations as possible. So requests that are substantially more than $50,000 are less likely to be funded. If you're like, I'm not sure if I should request 50,000 or 60,000, or I have an idea that's like really in depth, that would be 150,000. Make sure we talk about that in our one-on-one meeting. I'm happy to guide you through, knowing that SRE has never launched a process exactly like this one or with this exact RFP. So we're learning too in terms of how many applications we'll get, what they'll be for, how much they'll be asking for, et cetera. But we can think through how to balance that together. Funding can be split between multiple trainers and or consultants. So if you're having one person, for example, look at your policies and then another person doing your actual staff training, totally fine with us. We also have folks on our list that can do both, but you can decide. If you are splitting the money between multiple trainers or consultants, please just make sure that both of your consultants or trainers have the scope of work included in the LOI that you submit to us, so we can see the work that's being split between the two and the way that you're splitting funds between the two. We do want to make sure that what you're applying for will be long-term, meaningful culture change work within your organization. So a one-time like sexual harassment training is not what we're looking to fund in this round. We are thinking about long-term work that will take place over a year or 2 years that really shifts culture in a measurable way. And 85% of the funds, therefore, must be paid to the consultant or trainer. You should have funds that are dedicated to making sure that you have the staff capacity to bring this to life, but really the bulk should be paying the consultant or trainer to do this work. And I think everybody here, just looking at who I'm seeing in the chat and your faces, is a current SRE network member. But just a reminder that we are currently in the renewal process. And so if you have not renewed your membership for 2022 yet, please make sure to do that before you apply and submit your LOI on September 16th. And if you have not been an SRE network member for the last 6 months, you're not eligible for this pool. We hope to see you in 2023, but we rule out folks who have made a commitment to SRE and are going to maintain that commitment long-term over the grant. Danielle, do you want to come off mute and just explain that question a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So you mentioned that it's not about doing one-off trainings, it's about doing more long-term systemic work within our own organizations. But can we put the grant towards helping our network organizations apply this long-term in their spaces?
So we want to make
because we work with a network of around 100 programs all across the country. So we work professionally with them. So could we use this for an initiative that would bring systemic change work to them and help them do it?
Got it. Let's talk about that more in terms of your specific network. I think if we were talking more generally about whether or not an organization can apply to do sort of change work that impacts their staff versus the community that they work with, grants can be for both. We want to make sure that both are covered. So we wouldn't want to do only community work, but we could do community work and staff work as we see them as intertwined. The way that a staff experiences an organization will translate into how they interact with the folks that work for or the folks that interact with the organization as lay leaders or volunteers or program participants. If that makes sense.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah. Any other questions on that? So what are some examples of things your organization can work on? Responding to complaints, so creating the processes, protocols, documents, et cetera, that an organization would use to respond to complaints. Creating policies to address or prevent harassment and discrimination, a power analysis, so answering questions like who holds power in my organization and why. Respectful workplace, which is a broad range, but could be creating cultures of feedback, launching affinity groups, et cetera. Hiring advancement policies, and accountability after harm. Examples of training topics are how to conduct an internal investigation, bystander intervention, men as allies, consent and healthy relationships, unconscious or implicit bias, and intersectional gender justice. We did not create an exhaustive list. I feel like I want to repeat that a ton of times. You know better what your organization needs than we do. And so if what your organization needs is not on that list, we are absolutely welcoming that conversation, as long as the topic includes addresses and includes gender-based harassment, discrimination, or inequity. I'm actually really excited about hearing where we didn't include things on the list that are going to create impact in your organization. And we also understand that all of these topics are intertwined. And so your proposal does not have to be for one or one within one. You can cover multiple topics within your proposal, as long as you feel like you found the right trainer or consultant to address those topics within your organization. I would love to just stop sharing my screen for a second and hear if anybody has training or consulting topics that you've already been thinking about as you've pondered our RFP. Yeah, Elizabeth, thanks.
Sure. So one thought is just an overall analysis or an audit of DEI or DEIB broadly. So what just we would love a consultant to help us learn where we are, so we can figure out where we need to go in a broader strategic plan.
Great, love that. Anyone else?
One of the things we've been thinking about at one of our campuses at Hillel is how to recreate a new culture. After COVID, we've been virtual for 3 years. We've got entirely new staff managing that Hillel, and we don't really have a culture that exists. So we want to create one.
Of that. One more person. Yeah, Shoshana, thank you.
So we're developing a process of training into the lay professional partnership. and really empowering the lay leaders to be a part of this across our network. And hopefully modeling as well the use of trainers and then encouraging them to take their own steps in that direction.
Yeah, so important that like everyone involved or everyone that interacts with an organization feels involved and connected to change work. Thank you. Let's jump back in. Can everyone see? I can no longer see you, so I just want to make sure.
Rachel, we can't see your screen.
Got it. Now you can, yeah. Perfect, thank you. All right. So just things that we want to make sure you know have restrictions. First is train the trainer model. If your organization is considering a train the trainer model, please make sure that that train the trainer model has been done before, that there is data available to show the effectiveness of that training program, both for those who were initially trained and sort of the second tier or subsequently trained folks. And then the second thing is we really want most of our funding for this round to be dedicated to actually implementing the curriculum versus developing it. So we know that curriculum will need to be tailored to organizations, but you shouldn't be needing to create a brand new curriculum for the work that you're doing with this grant. And just a sort of disclaimer, grants cannot focus on costs associated with hiring an external investigator, conducting an internal investigation after a specific incident, or like I said, any new train the trainer or new curriculum development. Some key dates just to keep in mind. We released the RFP on August 9th. Hi, you're at the Grantseekers workshop right now. Welcome. September 16th, your letters of intent are due. There'll be two sort of selection rounds as part of our process. The week of October 31st, you'll be informed if you made it to the second round. And the second round involves a phone or a Zoom visit with someone on our grants review committee. Those will happen between November 7th and November 18th. And then we'll let you know about whether or not you've received a grant in early December, and then grants will begin in early January 2023. So just some things to note in those key dates. You will have a chance after the 3-page initial LOI to really go over your idea with someone on our grants review committee. You don't need to feel like you need to write every single detail in that initial 3-page LOI, because if you make it to the second round, you'll have a whole conversation where you're able to elaborate, answer questions, highlight things, etc. Please don't schedule your work to begin before January 2023 because grants will not be dispersed yet. And because these are 1 to 2 year grants, all of the work will need to be completed in those 2 years. So to be done by December 2024. In order to submit an LOI, and I feel like this is really important, organizations will need to have already selected a trainer or consultant and communicated with them about the scope of work. So you need to really have 2 meetings between now and when you submit your LOI, one with your consultant or trainer and one with me. Those are required too. So make sure that those are scheduled well in advance of when you want to actually submit, which is by the 16th of September. The basics are needed to be included in your LOI: organization name, contact name, title, email, etc. Your operating budget, your total requested amount over the 1 or 2 years, your organization's specific training or consulting needs. And it's really important to be able to talk about how you identified those needs, how you assessed or measured your organization's readiness for the training or consultation you're undertaking, what the goals of your consultation and training will be, how you will measure success and continue to measure success and evaluate over time, the actual scope of work, how you selected that trainer and the scope of work that the trainer is going to be doing, and a simple budget for how the grant funds will be allocated. And we'll jump into these questions in a second. So how do you answer what your organization's specific training or consultation needs and how you identify those needs are? We're really looking for you to be clear around who decided what your organization's current needs are and how they decided. Was it conversations over time that happened pretty organically? Did you do a needs assessment? Did you have like a specific aha moment within your organization where you were like, we need this training to do this, to accomplish this goal, or et cetera, et cetera? How have you assessed or measured your organization's readiness for the training or consultation? That what's particularly important there is who's going to be involved in this pretty long-term culture change effort, and how prepared are they? Who are the staff members? Who are the board members? How do you think your staff or community will respond? How are you thinking about that, et cetera, et cetera? What will the goals of your training or consultation be? And most important to us, how will you measure those goals? How will you know that the training and consultation was successful? And then how over time will you continue to know that it's successful once like the last session and the last meeting happen? It's really important that this part is really specific. It can be a formal evaluation. It could be a staff survey. It could be a climate assessment. You could work with your consultant or trainer to figure out how you'll measure. But we really want to be able to tell a story, or for you to be able to tell a story at the end where our organization was in one place in terms of culture when we began the grant. This is how we know that we're in a different place, and this is how we know we're going to continue on that positive trajectory as people and our organization change. In terms of who your trainer will be and what their scope of work will be, because the actual scope of work should be provided to us in the LOI, all we're doing is making sure that like the way that you set goals really matches the scope of work that you've worked out with the trainer or consultant, and that the trainer or consultant knows how their work will be measured within your organization over time. And then in terms of how you select your trainer, as folks know, we have a recommended trainer list. You're welcome to use that list. And if you use that list, then answering the question will be a little bit easier, but you're welcome to use whoever you'd like. And we just want to make sure that you have vetted the person or the organization, that they have an expertise and effectiveness and a proven track record in this work. Questions on any of that before I go into evaluation criteria? A couple had no, so I'll keep going, but feel free to stop me. Our evaluation criteria falls into sort of a couple different categories. First is the need. We want to make sure that you are being intentional about addressing safety, respect, and equity in your organization and have a demonstrated need to do this work, and also the demonstrated ability to identify and implement the work over time. Impact, so seeking partners who can tell us how you will measure change with the clear and achievable short and long-term goals that we really just talked about. A learning orientation, is your staff and board really committed and invested in the proposal that you're setting forth and making the work come to life, and changing and growing and evaluating over time? The viability, so like dream big. We hope that this will really make a great impact on your organization, but also make sure that you have the ability to day-to-day do the work of implementing the change, and that you have the capacity to see your organization and the constituents that your organization work with impacted by the work of your trainer and consultant. And then we are SRE, we are the SRE network. And so we are seeking partners who value safety, respect, and equity and center in all parts of the organization and can articulate how you value it in the work that you do every day. Last thing, and like I say it's last thing, and you'll probably hear me say it again. I think I've already said it at least twice. A meeting with me is required to apply for this grant. We know that it is the first time we've done a grant like this. And so we want to make sure that you and I and SRE and your organization are on the same page as you're creating your proposal. I also hope that those meetings are helpful for you in terms of bringing your idea onto paper and then into life. And make sure that you've also had an initial conversation with your trainer or consultant. And we only have a little bit less than a month until your LOIs are due. So please get to scheduling those meetings sooner rather than later. If you email me the week of the 16th and say I have like a meeting with you on Monday and then my consultant on Tuesday, and then I want to apply by Thursday, I'll do my best. But I hope that you will have had a conversation well before that. Anything I didn't address, questions, concerns? Folks feel ready? Yeah. if you're ready, I'm ready. Like I said, please schedule your meeting with me. Excited to hear about your ideas. If questions come up after we end, also feel free to email me. I'm around. This is one of my favorite parts of the work I do, just really idea sharing and discussing and helping organizations get from an idea to your application for our review committee. So looking forward to meeting with all of you soon. Good.
Thank you.
Rachel, I just wanted
Rachel,
to know if we could get a copy of the slides so I could share it with other members of my team here.
Yeah, so that we'll post a recording on our of the whole call on the website. And then also we'll email it out for the actual slides. If you could send me an email, I can send them back to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.